Give it a second or two. Hello and welcome everyone to our monthly webinar series Beyond the Field. I'm your moderator, Amanda McLean, the Farm Management Specialist here with North Dakota Farmers Union. Thank you for joining us today, as the purpose of these webinars is really to bring you timely information and offer in-depth conversations with our industry experts. These webinars are held the third Thursday of each month at 10 a.m. Today, we will be covering FSA farm programs and their updates. Before we get started, a few housekeeping tip items. Everyone is on mute, but we welcome your questions at any time. Please feel free to submit them into the chat or the Q&A box, and we will have time at the end of this presentation for those to be answered. This webinar is also being recorded, but if you'd like to rewatch it, you can find it by going to YouTube and simply searching North Dakota Farmers Union. That is where you'll also find our other monthly webinars that have been recorded. Lastly, we ask that you please complete the exit survey at the end of this webinar, as your feedback continues to help us with ideas and content for what is important to you for these monthly webinars. With that, I would like to introduce today's guest speaker, Brandy LaFramboise, who is the Farm Program Director for the State FSA Office. Brandy is in charge of the production adjustments, which include ARC and PLC, price loss coverage, crop disaster programs, non-insured crop disaster program assistance program, and farm records. Brandy has been with the state FSA office since January of 2025. She has also served as a county executive director in North Dakota for 5 years. She has been with the FSA office with over 20 years of experience. Her and her husband live in Findlay, North Dakota. With that, I will turn it over to you, Brandy.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm going to recap 2 ad hoc programs that are going on in my FSA department, the Farmers Bridge and the Supplemental Disaster Program for 2023 and 2024 crop years. And then we will talk about the OBA implications for 2025 and 2026 ARC PLC program, which is often referred to as the main farm program with FSA. In North Dakota, the local FSA office has completed and paid over 80% of our FBA applications. They have put $618 million in the hands of our producers. We have another 5% of the applications that are in the approval process. So that means in the 3 short weeks, we handed out 85% of the applications that we have handled them. I could not be prouder. These offices have worked their tails off to get the money out the door. It has been amazing the traffic that they have seen and the busyness that we have seen in these months to get it out. So we can assure you that we know it was much needed. So for the 15% of you that have not walked through our doors yet, I'm going to give you just a quick presentation on FBA, then we'll go into SDRP and the other 2 programs, and then 2025 and 2026 ARC PLC. So the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program has been highly anticipated after it was announced on December 8th, with $11 billion being dispersed through FBA, and then there will be $1 billion that will be put aside for the specialty crops and the sugar beets. The enrollment period began on February 23rd, and it will end on April 17th of 2026, so really shy of 2 months worth of enrollment. The specialty crop and sugar beet portion will be coming later this spring. To be eligible for FBA, the producer had to have a certified acreage on file by December 19th for that producer. The applicant must be actively engaged in farming in 2025, as well as a U.S. citizen or resident alien, along with the other eligibility requirements. The other necessary forms required by the program, like the adjusted gross income, the wetland compliance, need to be completed timely within a year from the deadline of the program, and those have to be on file prior to any payments being able to be released. All eligible acres needed to be located in the United States of America or our territories. have been certified on the 2025 acreage report by December 19th. And all intended uses for FBA eligible commodities are eligible, excluding grazing, volunteer stands, experimental, green manure, left standing, or cover crops. These are the FBA eligible commodities. North Dakota has eligible acres for 17 of these commodities. It is a one application per producer, and that can be submitted to any FSA office by close of business on April 17th, and it will be processed by their administrative office. These applications were pre-filled using our CARS data, or our acreage reporting data, as of February 1st of 2026. Producers cannot alter any of the pre-filled application. If the pre-filled application, the acreage data is incorrect, the producer would have to revise the application with their local FSA office. The producer can submit the application via any of our normal practices, in person, mailed, emailed, or even our box, which we've had around since about 2020. An exciting new option was using the login.gov account to e-sign the application. And that producer actually had no direct contract with the local FSA office. If you have not already signed up for a login.gov account, please consider doing it. As we navigate through this new technology, I believe there will be new opportunities to use this method in the future. This option is great for a producer whose application was correct, and the producer really had no further questions for our local office. Quite possibly, they would also have already had their AGI and other eligibility work on file too, or previously. The payment limit for FBA is $155,000 per person or legal entity. The FBA program applied a simple proportional assistance to producers using a uniform formula to cover a portion of the modeled losses during the 2025 crop year. These are the payment rates per crop per acre. One of the misconceptions is always that, oh, I wish I'd have planted everything to oats because they got $81.75. The reason oats got $81.75 is really because they had the greatest losses. If you actually think about it, you would have much rather planted everything to flax, so your losses would have been smaller on the farm. But we have soybeans at the 30.88 and wheat 39.35, and then our corn was the 44.36. So probably our most popular or our biggest payments for North Dakota. There is an FBA website along with a fact sheet if you would like more information concerning FBA. On to the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program. Stage 1 began in July of 2025, and parts like Stage 2 and the quality have been added throughout the 2025 and 2026 calendar year. For Stage 1 in North Dakota, we have processed the majority of the applications and will continue to follow up with producers as our change reports are processed. Almost 18,000 applications have been done for Stage 1 in North Dakota. Stage 2 is much harder to know where we are at because Stage 2 combines quality and production losses, those shallow losses. So we don't have all those numbers, so we don't honestly know which producers will qualify for Stage 2 or not. SDRP provides assistance to eligible producers for crop production and quality losses due to qualifying disaster events and related conditions occurring in the calendar year 2023 or 2024. It is a separate application for each crop year. In North Dakota, the majority of our producers do have RMA or NAP coverage. SDRP has come in stages with the deadline for all being April 30th of 2026. So roughly about 6 weeks away, this program will end. The first part of stage one covered losses that were indemnified through RMA or NAP, and the quality loss portion was just added that considers quality losses that were not a part of that indemnified payment. So stage one really focused on producers that already received crop insurance payments. Stage two provides assistance for eligible losses of crops covered by crop insurance or NAP, but the loss was not severe enough to trigger an indemnity or was an uninsured crop or a shallow loss. The overall concept compares the expected value, what they should have gotten, and the actual value, what they did get of the crop by production or quality or a combination of the two. This table shows us how eligible acreage is considered for SDRP Stage 2 purposes. For insured APHs or yield-based plans, acres that are considered eligible under the applicable insurance policy are considered eligible acreage for Stage 2. This includes RMA provisions for initial and subsequently planted crops. If RMA says the eligible acres are, we agreed. For all other uninsured or insured NAP crops, it is the lesser of the reported or determined acres that are being planted or were prevented from being planted. The SCRP factor is the same for stage one or stage two. A producer with RMA coverage at 75% will get the bump up to 92.5%. Stage one payments were based on RMA data when a claim was filed with a notice of loss date in 2023 or 2024 calendar year. These payments took into consideration the coverage levels and the data from the claims. RMA determined the SCRP payment based on their data. This was multiplied by the share as reported on the SCRP application. All SCRP payments are factored at the end by that 35% payment factor. The first data bowl was completed on June 6th. There was another one this fall. We don't have the exact date of that, but we were able to release it to the offices about the end of December. And then just recently, very, very recently, like yesterday, we had our third data pull. So we are in the process of looking through those and seeing what other producers we need to reach out to. This is a stage one application. Anything that is pre-filled on the application cannot be changed by FSA. Those changes would need to come across in the change report from RMA. So FSA is not able, we have no ability to go in and change anything on the application from box 11 through 15. And then if you look at the yellow part, that is what the producer inputs. They say the share. What was their share on this? They agree to purchase crop insurance or NAP? And then what disaster event caused the loss? Stage two payments for insured crops are based on the producer's crop insurance policy data. That means all the core values come directly from RMA. The RMA sourced information used in the payment calculation is visible to us on our SURS dashboard. So this is new to us and the first time we've been able to see what actual data came across. And the dashboard is strictly for reference and to give a more clear visual of the information RMA sent over to us and where it shows up. County offices are able to utilize the report to show producers what information received for the stage two application, the price that the SDRP liability, and the calculated loss is the RMA price in place at the time of the sales closing date. Here is a snip of the dashboard that we see. It is at least a visual for us that we haven't been able to have before. This shows us what was sent, but obviously not what wasn't sent, which I think we all know is sometimes the issue. Producers need to work through their crop insurance or their AIP for questions about RMA data and to fix wrong or missing data. RMA data has the price, a key component in the calculation, along with other factors such as the production and premium, as well as the unit and acreage tied to each unit. The SCRP liability is the guarantee established by RMA, the expected revenue times the applicable SCRP factor. This is the dollars that a producer should have received for the crop according to RMA data using that SDRP factor. The calculated loss is the guarantee minus the actuals. The actuals take into consideration the quality loss. So if you have a 25% quality loss percentage, instead of taking your total bushels, your total production of 10,000 bushels times the price, it would be 7,500 bushels would be taken times the price. Potential insured indemnity, producers in stage 2 were not indemnified. So this part will calculate what the producer would have received if they were indemnified. We pay the difference between their coverage level or insured guarantee and the SDRP factor. Once we get that potential insured indemnity, we take that away from the calculated loss, and if that result is greater than 0, we add the premiums and fees times that 35% program factor to get the SDRP stage 2 payment. For insured APH-based plans, producers are able to override the RMA producer certified production if they do not agree with the pre-filled amount on the stage 2 applications. If the producer feels the pre-filled amount is inaccurate and enters amount in the producer certified production amount, this amount has to be share adjusted to match the RMA shares for this unit. Then they must provide acceptable documentation to COC satisfaction to support that amount entered. However, if they agree that the amount pre-filled from RMA is accurate, they are not required to provide documentation to support the amount. If the RMA producer certified production is blank or missing, the producer is required to certify their production amount on the application and provide those acceptable records to support the amount entered. If both RMA producer certified production and the producer certified production are entered on Part C, the producer certified production will override the pre-filled RMA production. To support any certified production entered on the FSA 504, producers need to provide acceptable production record. This table breaks down acceptable record by type and when each type is used. RMA records can be used as verifiable records and are subject to the COC determination of acceptability. Here is the 504 showing the pre-filled with RMA data for Part C. Once again, FSA cannot change a pre-filled part of the application. The RMA crop, the unit number, the type, the practice, and unit of measure will be pre-filled on the application. RMA will calculate the STRP liability for Part C, and that will show on the 504. And the RMA certified amount of production will be provided on the 504. If the producer reported their production to their crop insurance agent for the non-loss year. This RMA certified production amount will also be share adjusted, which means it will be adjusted by the RMA percentage of insurable interest the producer has in the crop type and practice listed by the unit of measure on the application. The RMA producer certified production or SDRP producer certified production is the total production for the unit. This is the total amount that needs to be used to calculate the producer's certified quality loss percentage on the quality calculator. Stage 1 and Stage 2 quality is based on the same concepts. Producers will be eligible for a quality loss adjustment if their harvested production suffered a quality loss due in whole or in part to a qualifying disaster event. The portion of the production that suffered that quality loss due to a qualifying event is defined as the affected production. The affected production from the quality event may have also been further damaged later and would still be eligible. Quality discounts that could have been mitigated through reasonable or available measures are not eligible. Affected production is the producer's ownership share of the harvested production to a standard moisture of eligible crops as established by the U.S. grain standards, a state regulatory agency, or industry standard that had a quality loss due to a qualifying disaster event. When the producer is calculating that quality loss percentage, they must include all production that is affected by quality along with the total bushels not affected per the unit. If all or part of the production did not have a loss due to a qualifying disaster event, then that portion of the production is not eligible for a quality loss. If the producer had multiple loads of production that were impacted by the quality and it was exactly the same, the quality loss percentage will be averaged and weighted across the total affected production. You will see on the calculator the total production for the unit. This is the production number on that 504 that the producer is using, would be entered at the top. And the loads with quality losses are added, and the quality loss percentage will continue to change as those loads are added. Quality losses for all crops other than forage are defined as a decrease in value based on the discounts provided at the time of the sale due to the physical condition of the crop, indicated by an applicable grading factor. That affected production must be directly related to the qualifying disaster event. Verifiable documentation of the total loss of value and the corresponding grading factors due to quality is required. The quantity of quality loss is calculated using that quality loss percentage. This is the percentage of loss calculated for a reduction in the total dollar value of the crop due to the reduction in the physical condition of the crop indicated by an applicable grading factor or nutrient value. The quality loss percentage will be calculated separately for forage crops and all other crops. The quality loss percentage for forage crop is going to be based on the reduction in nutritional values. Producers must provide acceptable production records to substantiate the amount of eligible affected production. This slide breaks down the specific documentation required depending on the crop type. For eligible crops other than forage, producers must provide that verifiable documentation of the total value loss and that corresponding grading factors for the quality loss due to the disaster event. So the producer has to have, for wheat example, what caused the quality loss? Where are the falling numbers? We need proof of the falling numbers. Then we need to know the price that they should have gotten, the expected price, and then the price that they actually got. So those are the three components that you have to be able to put on the calculator so we can figure out that quality loss number percentage. Producers must have that verifiable documentation of the discount factors to support the loss in quality. Producers will be required to certify the stage 1 quality loss percentage based on the production evidence and those verifiable grading factors or nutrient tests that affected their production due to quality. If a producer's certified quality loss percentage is less than or equal to RMA's quality loss percentage, a stage one quality loss payment will not be calculated. So if RMA stated that you had 100% loss, it was already done for quality was taken into consideration, there would be no reason to come into our office because we can't give you higher than 100. If RMA says that 50% of the indemnity was due to quality, then for us to come into play, you would have to have an additional, a number higher than 50%. If the producer certified the quality loss is greater than RMA's, the difference between the two percentages will be calculated. Then that percentage will be multiplied by the total revenue to count provided by RMA. The resulting value will equal the stage one quality loss payment before reductions. Stage one quality payments will be reduced by that 35% payment factor, the same as stage one and stage two payments. Stage one quality will be completed on Part C of the FSA 526Q for insured APH or yield-based crops. On this slide, the areas highlighted in yellow represent information that once again is pre-filled on the form using RMA data that was already used to calculate the original stage one payment. It includes items such as the crop, the unit information, practice, unit of measure, production to count before the quality adjustment, and then the RMA quality loss percentage. Producers and county offices cannot edit or change any of that pre-filled information shown in yellow. Any fields that are not highlighted are fields that must be completed by the producer or COC as applicable. The percentage of quality loss should not be left blank. It should always be put in there on number 24. Even if you feel it's exactly the same as 23, then you should mimic that number. To help producers with the calculation of that quality loss percentage, calculators have been created for all crops and forages. These calculators should be used in the producer's documentation to support the quality loss percentage used on the stage one quality application or stage two application. The calculator has had changes made to it since it was first released, so it's always a good practice to go back to that main page and grab it again. There is also an Excel sheet that the county office can provide for anybody that would have loads that exceed 50 units. So if there's more than 50 loads that you need to enter on that quality loss calculator, reach out to the county office and they can provide you with an Excel sheet that would be allowed to go above the 50, because this one, the max is 50 lines. Here is the calculator. At the top, you're going to load the production with quality losses. How many different situations, how many loads assembly sheets are going to be there? You can have anywhere from 1 to 50. The total production for the unit should be matching the production on that FSA 504 or that FSA 526Q. You can use the drop down to find the type, the crop. If you do type really, really fast, you can get it too, but sometimes it's just easier to scroll and find it. There is also a spot for the unit number along with the unit of measure. In this example, I loaded 4 loads. The first 2 loads were single loads on an assembly sheet. The other 2 were the whole assembly sheet. As long as the prices and the reason for the quality loss are the same, they can be loaded as one. An error message will appear in red if the total loads of production exceeds the total production. So if you have 10,000 bushels as your total, your production with quality losses cannot exceed that. The reset button really resets it. It clears the whole entire sheet. As long as you don't hit the reset button, you can change loads and it will remember what was previously in there. That can be a good thing and it can also be a bad thing, because if you went from 4 loads to 2 loads and then back up to 6, it would preload the other 2 with the first 4. So It's just be tricky. Make sure that you're consistently looking at it and loading the loads that you need. These calculators are very user-friendly, much better than what we've sometimes had in the past. Here are other informations as well about the linkage requirement. Linkage is required. So if you do get an SDRP payment, you have to meet linkage and you have to agree to it. These are the resources. There is an SDRP producer-facing website, and then there are 3 fact sheets and then an at-a-glance card as well. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act is what we're going to cover next, and then we will go into our PLC. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act was enacted on July 4th of 2025. This authorized the ARC PLC programs for 2026 through 2031, along with modifications to components of the 2025 ARC PLC program. These modifications will continue through 2031 as well. It also provided a one-time opportunity to allocate an additional 30 million base acres nationwide in crop year 2026. These additional 30 million base acres will be in effect for 2026 program year and will be based on the 2019 through 2023 eligible planting history for each farm. Existing base acres and yields will not change. All farms with reported eligible covered commodities in 2019 through 2023 will be eligible for an allocation. This will be a proportion to the ratio of the 5-year average of planted and considered planted covered commodities. If the allocation exceeds the 30 million base acres, then the acres will be factored across the nation. The free acres on the existing 2026 farms will be where these allocated acres land. So if your farm is a fully based farm, there will be no room for allocation. The acreage history dig will happen behind the scenes based on the cropping history from 2019 through 2023 that is currently on file with FSA offices. The timing of the owner's notification is still to be determined based on when this history dig is finished nationwide. The allocation of acres will feel very different than it has in the past because this is going to be based on existing data and then factored according to the language in OBA. Once this process is completed over the next few months, a 2026 ARC PLC enrollment and election period will follow. Agricultural risk coverage will include both options of county and individual and the price loss coverage for 2026 through 2031. OBA included the continuation of the agricultural risk coverage for both options of county and individual and the price loss coverage for 2026 through 2031. Some modifications were authorized, and those will go into effect for the 2025 program year. That was completed by April 15th, so you had to be signed up by April 15th of last year for 2025, and then all of the successions that were completed by September 30th. The 2025 changes will take place behind the scenes to formulas and numbers that determine the payment rates. These changes will make the program more relevant and better equipped to aid in the changes to the market and yields for ARC and the market that affects PLC. There is no action needed by the producer. The effective reference price was adjusted for 2025. Prior to the number was stuck at a relatively low number from the 2014 Farm Bill. So with the OBA, this adjustment brought the reference price up, and then the percentage also changed from 85 to 88%, and that will help too. Here are the reference prices that will be used for 2025 and the future. Soybeans went from $8.40 to $10, corn from $3.70 to $4.10, and all the oil seeds jumped from 2015 per counterweight to $23.75. The Arc County benchmark will also be taken times 80% instead of 86%, which gives each producer a higher guaranteed calculation. Instead of losing out on 14%, or basically saying that you're going to have 14% less, it almost gives you that loss. Now that'll change to only 10%. If you can remember precisely, the payment rate could not move from year to year more than 10%. So the biggest bump it could have would be 10%. Now that has increased to 12%. So we can have a change from one year to another up to 12%. Payment limitation went to 155,000, and for 2026, due to inflation, it will go to 160,000. Amanda and I were talking prior when I started with FSA back in 2000. Our payment limit for the ARC program, or the main farm program, was 40,000. So it has significantly changed. That 125,000 had been locked in since 2025 or since 2014. So this will be our first change for over 10 years. For 2025, the producer will automatically get the higher of PLC or Arc County payment without having to do anything. It doesn't matter what your elections are, you're going to get the higher of. This will happen automatically. If you had it enrolled in Arc IC farms, those farms will remain in Arc IC. For 2026, we will have a new election and enrollment period down the road. It is quite possible that we will know some of those combine numbers, like what did we actually get? And we will know the yields that were growing for the county. We should know if we have some losses on production. So this will help in your decision-making process. It kind of takes one of the factors out. Normally when you sign up by the spring of the year, you don't know, are you going to have a production loss? How do you go into Arc County, or should you go into PLC? We should have some of those numbers because we should have possibly wheat, barley. It just depends on the timing of the enrollment period, how much we will have completed. Ron Haugen, always our advocate and your guys' advocate at NDSU, already has the calculator working for 2026, and more will come as we get closer to that stage. Here are some additional resources that you can have for ARC PLC. There is a new fact sheet that has been put out for the 2025 year. We do not have one yet for 2026, but we will expect that as the program rolls out. That is all I have for you guys today. So I appreciate you guys taking your time to hop on. And if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a little bit to answer those as well.
Thanks, Brandy. We do have a few questions that came in. We'll start with one when you were talking about the farmer bridge payments. Can the CC 943, 75% of the coverage gross income from farming form be used for the Farm Bridge Assistance Program?
So for this one, the only one that there is the AGI. There is no allowance for a bump up payment that we have sometimes seen in the ERP in the past. So this time it is a straight up payment limit of 155,000. You cannot get a second payment limit. And I think, I can go a little bit further into that. This is the first time that we have offered a program without a payment factor for a number of years. So if you look at SDRP, we're saying that payment factor is 35%. This time around with FBA, they gave you 100%. And I do believe that is part of the reason why we are not allowing that second payment limit because they were able to get as close as possible to releasing all of that $11 billion so that we would get it to you guys quickly and not have to do it in stages.
Thanks, Brandy. Okay, so some of the questions regarding the changes with the OBA and the ARC and PLC. So the question is more around the base reallocation. Do the producers need to request doing this, or will they be automatically done? Again, I think you said that those will kind of be done behind the scene. Do approved prevent plant acres get counted or only planted acres? And if a land, I'll let you answer that one and then we can continue with some more of that.
So for 2025, with the allocation of the payments are going to come into effect for 2026. Those are going to happen behind the scenes. So a producer this time around really will only have two options. If you had a subsequent crop, if you planted wheat and it failed, and then you planted corn, for instance, or you planted soybeans, those owners will be able to come in and pick which crop they want. Do they want to use wheat or do they want to use soybeans? I can tell you in North Dakota, we are going to have very limited subsequent acres because it's just not something that happens a ton here. So those owners will have that decision. The other only decision that an owner will have is if they want to opt out. So let's say they had a 10-acre farm and they had 5 acres of free acres on there, and they're like, you know what, we don't want to deal with FSA. We don't want to walk through the door. We don't want additional base acres. They would be able to come in and opt out and say, hey, don't put us in those 30 million allocation acres. Those would be the only two choices. Otherwise, all the rest will happen behind the scenes. Producers will be notified once it happens, and then there will be always a 90-day period for the owners to be able to make these decisions. And then after that period has passed, that is when the actual allocations will happen for each person.
Thanks, Brandy. So kind of going off that same question, if a landowner or producer does not currently participate in the farm programs, are they still eligible to gain base acres?
You have to have an acreage report filed to us for 2019 through 2023. If you have not done that, there will be an opportunity for somebody to be able to come in and show us, hey, I should have been reporting these all those years. I didn't. Let's go ahead and get those reported now. So that will happen in that 90-day window.
Awesome. And then is there a certain like date or timeline that they have to have that
We
done if they
don't.
want to? Okay.
We don't. Once they get that odor notification letter, that's kind of when the time clock is going to start. And we don't have those dates yet. We don't have those timelines. So we are anticipating them. We are ready here. I can tell you that we have had some offices that have been getting those acreage digs is what we call them done. North Dakota, we're just so fortunate to have such good PAs in our offices that when we give them a task, they don't even flinch. They just get to business and they get it done. So we're ahead. We know that it's going to be coming. We are, it's nationwide. So we are really at the mercy of everybody for us to get this part done. And I think one of the questions was about planted and considered planted, and it's going to be both. So if you have corn or you had prevent plant corn, it's going to take into consideration both of them when it's allocating the acres. I think the biggest misconception that I have heard and seen is that we're going to change all of your base acres, and that's untrue. If you have wheat and barley right now, you're going to have wheat and barley continuing. But whatever free acres you had, some of those 50 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres, North Dakota, we do have some free acres. A lot are because of edible beans, potatoes, even some of our sugar beets, or our grasses from out west. We do have some free acres. Those are the acres that are going to get or that are going to be allowed to get a percentage of this 30 million.
So is it, while we're still talking on this topic, is to update those acres the responsibility of the producer or the landowner? Let's say if you're renting.
Technically, Technically, it's the owner. And one of the reasons is, and we always think this is an interesting concept because the owner makes the decision. And often the producer, especially if they are not a share crop producer, they're the ones who reap the benefits. But these base acres and yields stick with the land. That is why it is the owner's responsibility to make these decisions and come through. And, I think all of us know that the operators are going to have to probably help the owner and say, hey, this is what was planted, or hey, maybe this isn't right. So they are going to have to work together. But in the end, it is the owner's responsibility to make sure the stuff is done correctly so that the bases are allocated correctly to their land.
Thanks, Brandy. So shifting gears a little bit towards the ARC and PLC, especially looking towards 2026. Um, I know again we don't know exactly when that's going to open up, but is there kind of like a timeline of when it will open up and like a due date?
There isn't. And at this time, we don't have an enrollment period. We don't know when it's going to start and we don't know when it's going to end. I can assure you when that process happens, it is going to hit every single one of our newsletters. Open our newsletters. There are good information in there. There is a timeline. Make sure those are open. I'm pretty sure some of our local radio stations will cover this. It's quite possible that you and I will hop on another webinar along with Ron and walk us through that 2026 process because it is going to be another process. You are going to be required to enroll. You are going to be required to make an election. If you choose not to, you're going to be sitting out for 2026. And, sometimes we haven't been as relevant because of those low prices and that some of those reference prices. We're going to come back in the game and we are excited about that because that's what our program's for. It is supposed to help with price losses and when you have a loss across a county that is due to price and production. So this is something that we do want people to get back into and make sure that, hey, they're walking into our door and they're getting themselves signed up and we're getting those elections done.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, we will definitely be having a special webinar if we have to. Do you, I guess going forward, do you see uh the ARC and PLC enrollment for like 2027 beyond might be going towards like later in after planting, or is it just because of this year with the changes and the base acres and everything? Just kind of
I
happened
think
that
we'll
way.
get I think we're going to get back to a similar process that we're going to go back into, and we'll have it again in the spring. But just due to the timing of this one, you're going to get a 1 year advantage, and I'm great. I'm grateful for that because if we all had crystal balls, and I've said this for however many years, if I had that crystal ball to know what our yields were going to be, I probably wouldn't be working here. I'd hop into something else and do that. But we don't have that crystal ball, so it always has made it a little bit of a challenge. One thing that is going to change this year, and people often made it be an FSA rule, that in order to participate in the ECO and the SEO coverage with RMA, you had to be in PLC. That was removed as part of the OBA. So, and it technically wasn't an FSA requirement. We didn't care what you were in, but RMA did. And they said if you're going to be in ECO or SEO, you have to be in PLC. And that was taken away. So that is just one more nice little thing that will help producers be able to have the crop insurance protection that they want and also the program, the farm program protection that they want of ARC County or PLC.
Ready. So
And a simple thing that I always say is ARC County is based on the county yield and the price, and PLC is based on the price alone. So they do use relatively some of the same numbers to get us across the board. Our county just happens to put that yield in. So you could have a price increase and a yield loss and still cover for our county. Price PLC, it doesn't matter what your yield is. If you don't have a price loss, you're out.
thanks, Brandy. I think just to recap, because we've talked a lot about base acres and everything, and I think we'll shift gears to another program, but just to recap. So the base acreage update is voluntarily. You don't have to do it if, right? And
It's
it's
it's not
happening
really
behind the scenes.
voluntarily. It's going to happen automatically. It's going to happen automatically behind the scenes. If you don't want to be in it, Owners will have the opportunity to opt out. Otherwise, it's going to just happen.
Right. And it's more based, it goes with the land, so whoever owns the land. But if you're renting, it's a good thing for those producers to work with the landowners if they should be adjusted or if they can be.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Now we have quite a few questions coming in on SDRP. So we'll switch over to that. Will there be an additional payment based on the SDRP phase one payments only paying out 35%?
I don't know. One of those things that we just don't know. So what happens is after the sign up ends, then the national office has all of our numbers and they know that we had this much money to spend and this is how much we spent. So that is possible where that 35% could change. If the 35% basically used up all the money, then probably not. But if it didn't use up all the money that was allocated, then that is where we could see that additional percentage. It's 35% across the board. I think that change will happen for everything. So if it's going to go from 35, it's going to go to 30, 40. It's going to go to 40 for stage one, stage two, and quality.
Okay. So here's an example. In 2024, I did not have a production loss on hard red spring wheat. I did not open an MCPI claim. I was discounted a buck 20 per bushel for protein, low protein. Will I be able to apply for a quality payment or is a protein not covered?
So for us, this would go into your stage two application if you did not receive anything from RMA. And yes, basically what you're going to do is look at that quality and you're going to say, hey, this is what I should have gotten. This is what I did get. And then you're going to bring us that proof, and that's where it would come in. For us, the quality factor had to be determined, had to happen in the field, and had to be caused by an eligible disaster event. So if you had excess moisture, in 2024, we had many counties that had the qualifying drought. So that could be it. It's just that quality factor had to happen in the field and be caused by one of our disaster events. So for surely, go look at that calculator page, go talk to your local FSA office, figure out your SDRP unit, get that stuff put in there, and then bring us that documentation to show us your protein loss.
So when you talk about disaster losses, did prevent plant also fall in that as a disaster?
So if you had prevent plant and you got paid indemnity, most of those came across on that stage one application. So stage two really doesn't have necessarily a prevent plant thing because you didn't get paid on it. There wasn't a production loss on it. So those ones really didn't come across to us. If you had an uninsured crop, then yes, we can look at prevent plant. But for stage one, it mostly happened on those.
Okay. Um, so now, still kind of on that, but with these new changes in the payment limits, is the SDRP separate or additional to the farm program limitations, or is it a combination? How's that work with all the different programs? You have your bridge payments, you have this payments. How's that now kind of factor?
So payment limit is often set per program, and a lot of our ad hoc ones have their own payment limit. So SDRP has one. It takes that payment limit and it goes to stage one, stage two, and the quality. It all goes into one. And then FBA has its own payment limit. And then ARC PLC has its own payment limit. So for the most part, every program has their own. And sometimes it will be combined. If I think back to our ERP and PARP, we put those ones together. They had two separate words, but they were the same kind of funding, so they came out of the same one. So FBA has its own, SDRP has its own, stage one, stage two. It takes into consideration 23 and 24 as well for those years, and then ARC PLC will have its own.
And then I guess this is kind of your crystal ball again too, but I know you said 2025, basically whatever's the highest payment, ARC or PLC will basically be triggered if it's the ARC county. Um, do you think they'll change that to higher payments for an annual election going forward, or it will kind of you'll have to select going for 2026 and beyond?
I think 2025 we're getting a free pass. And for us, if anybody was around in 20, I want to think it was 14, but it could have been, I get my farm bills mixed up now, but we did it a year later. So you signed up in like 2014, and then when the farm bill came, we made you go back and re-sign up for 2014 and 2015 at the same time. This time around, we're going to say, hey, we're not going to do that. And I think they even had us do that in 2019 and 2020 as well. This time, we're not going to do that. We're going to just say 2025, you got a free pass. If you came in our doors, you're getting paid. We're going to give you the higher of. You didn't know how stuff was going to change. So it would kind of be a disadvantage to say, oh, you're stuck with ARC County or PLC. So that's why it's just going to be a one-time thing. After that, it's going to go back to whatever you elected is what you're going to get paid or possibly get paid, I should say.
Well, thanks, Brandy. We're almost at the top of the hour, but just to recap those important dates. So, if you're going to do anything with the FBA, it's April 17th is the deadline, and then stage one and stage two for the SDRP is April 30th to get those filed in. And as for ARC and PLC, 2026 there'll be plenty of information out there to let you know when that opens up and the closing date. So again, thank you, Brandy, for sharing all this information. I know there was a lot, and I'll be following up with an email with this presentation if you're okay with us sharing it out and also the recording. With that, again, if you guys ever have any questions for Brandy that wasn't answered today, feel free to reach out to her or your local FSA office. If they can't answer it, they'll contact Brandy and get you some answers, hopefully what they can. And again, these are recorded so you can watch them. Our next webinar will be April 16th on a WOTUS status updates. And with that, thank you everybody for joining us today and hope you have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.